I have a Karolina Goswami video for you today, and she's looking at science and scientific methods and misconduct. And India is in the title. I don't think that that's going to be the topic of it. My guess is it's going to be a compare and contrast against China. But anyways, let's take a look at it, shall we?
Do you know that Qatar has a higher per capita R&D expenditure than China? But globally, China is increasingly being seen as a rising science superpower. Why? Well, the overall size of a nation's economy matters a lot. So, without reaching the per capita R&D expenditure levels of countries like South Korea, Japan and Israel, big economies are likely to have more money to spend on science. In terms of scientific output, the USA and China hold the top two places. China's rise in their research rankings is a well-known story, but its performance in relation to the H index is not very impressive. In these rankings, India is positioned at the 5th place. In terms of yearly publications, India was behind France, Canada, Italy and Russia at the start of the 21st century, but now it is well ahead of them all. Since its establishment in 1909, IICS has been India's primary institution for the growth of education and research in sciences and engineering.
But if we look at outstanding contributions to science, there is a large number, perhaps the largest, of it from India that has come out of this institute. Indian Institute of Science has the highest citation per faculty in QS ranking. So our overall ranking is somewhere like 180 or something, because we don't have many undergraduates, we don't have many international students and all that. But if you look at research, we are the highest cited or second highest cited institution in the world. And that tells how strong our science is. Technology is part of science, it's a technological sciences. So our technological disciplines are very strong. Again, if you look at those rankings, you will see that we are actually far higher in technology disciplines in ranking than in pure sciences. But we are good in both. In terms of product development, India has been generally not very high, because again, the culture didn't exist. Until 1990s, even market was closed. There was no incentive for developing products. It was all done in a very centralized manner. So, if you look at the number of years that have passed since the market opened, it's only 30 years. And if you look at the product development and innovation culture, it's way ahead in terms of the progress in 30 years.
The United States is currently the world's leading publisher of high-quality science, but China is catching up at a rapid rate. One of the metrics that is used to evaluate scientific impact is citation counts. Over the past decade, the citation situation of Chinese papers has improved tremendously. Why? Well, apart from increasing its science budget, China has systematically invested in trending research fields to harvest citations. The increasing number of papers published in important journals has also been contributed to by international collaborations, which helps the image of the Chinese scholars. But a citation-centric approach may not be good for science, as evaluating a scholar or a country only on the basis of the number of papers and citation counts can even discourage scientists to take risks and explore the unknown areas. The Elsevier data shows that India has 3 citations per publication. In contrast, China and Japan have 4.1, the US has 5.8, Germany has 5.9, and Britain has 6.1. During my visit to India's premier institutions, IITs, I was told that their primary focus is to solve the domestic problems through R&D instead of focusing on citations and international glory. It is important to point out that the 2018 scientific output of India is close to what China had in 2005. So it does appear that India has a lot of catching up to do, but what should be the way forward? Should India start spending more on science? And will that be enough to solve all the problems? In absolute numbers, India's investment in R&D has consistently increased over the years, although public expenditure as a fraction of GDP has been stationary for the last 2 decades. It has stayed continuously at a rate of 0.6% to 0.7% of GDP. The public sector is the primary player in the total R&D spending in India. This is in direct opposition to the format in most other advanced countries, where the private sector is the force that usually dominates the spending. Additionally, the government in India is the main user of these funds, as well as being the primary source of the R&D funding. In 2017, thousands of university students and scientists came together in several Indian cities to protest against the very low levels of funding provided for scientific research. However, it was not clear if their protest was also against India's private sector, which has not done very well when it comes to investing in science. And by the way, shouldn't the Indian scientists and researchers be asked why, in terms of quality of publications, India is an underperformer, especially when its average spending on a researcher is close to the per researcher spending of developed nations? As a matter of fact, it was even revealed that India's R&D expenditure per researcher was even higher than that of Canada, Israel and the UK. To an extent, misuse of funds may be one of the problems. According to an India-born scientist who has worked in both India and the USA, in India, many times the scientific instruments are purchased not based on utility, but their higher prices, because higher price gets more commission. And only less than 10% of the instruments are ever utilized, with less than 1% instruments' lifetime use time, especially for expensive equipment. Not only that, with just 200,000 full-time researchers in a population of around 1.3 billion, India has a very poor density in terms of scientific workforce. To make matters worse, many India-born researchers go abroad and serve their adopted nations. In 2011, it was found that 40% of India-born researchers were working overseas. In sharp contrast, many developed countries have the highest number of foreign scientists working and bringing international glory for them. The phenomenon of brain drain is not unique to India. A few years ago, China battled it too, but it decided to overcome the ugly situation. The 1,000 Talents program launched by China in 2008 was formed specifically to appeal to the Chinese origin scientists to return to China. Though the program was aimed to recruit 2,000 professionals, it ended up bringing more than 4,000. Some of these scholars were not even of Chinese origin. Each participant was offered an initial one-time payment of close to $160,000 by the program in addition to their regular salary. Not only that, 1 million of the approximately 3 million Chinese that left to study abroad since the 1980s have returned to China. In contrast, similar courses of action by India have attracted a relatively low number of scientists. It has also been reported that some of those that did wish to return were unable to find jobs in India. According to government records, between 2012 and 2017, 649 Indian scientists returned to India to pursue research opportunities. So, what are the solutions to these problems? India wants to double its expenditure on R&D to 2% of GDP by 2022. That's the right step in the right direction, but to achieve that target, the investments may be required from the private players as well. Proper utilization of funds without corruption, improving the quality of researchers, increasing the number of researchers, and creating an ecosystem that attracts the top brains are also needed. Moreover, there is no independent unit in India which can monitor all R&D projects. Something can be done in that regard too. And last but not least, India also has to create a research culture. That can happen if researchers start to get rewarded for their work. Unfortunately, India doesn't have a solid mechanism for technology transfer that would allow for the transfer of knowledge from university research labs to the private sectors to be commercialized. Many developed and developing nations have legislation that has already been put in place to encourage a close relationship between academia and industry. The Bayh-Dole Act in the US can serve as a good example. But at the same time, these moves need to be pursued very carefully, as there could also be a conflict of interest and unethical influence by the cash-rich industries on universities' R&D works. It is likely that India's scientific output will gradually increase, but will the country ever be able to compete against China, a nation which is also indulged in practices that many will call highly unethical? Questions are often asked about if China, without the hackers, would have made all the scientific progress that it did in recent years. In 2018, Chinese nationals were caught stealing secrets and intellectual property from technology companies, as well as the personal data of over 100,000 US Navy members. They were charged by the United States Justice Department for this extensive global hacking campaign. The director of the FBI, Christopher Wray, said, "China's goal, simply put, is to replace the US as the world's largest global superpower." In 2016, a Chinese expert from Canada, Su Bin, admitted that he played a prominent role in a conspiracy that originated in China. The conspiracy served to illegally hack into several files from Boeing that contained sensitive military files. It is estimated that 630,000 C-17 related files were stolen, which were worth $3.4 billion in research and development costs. Warnings have also been issued by US intelligence that China could be using students to spy and gather intel and secrets from American universities. Steal, imitate, adapt, invest, acquire, and then dominate. It does appear to be a time-tested strategy, but it would be reckless to uniquely associate it only with China. Francis Cabot Lowell stole the designs for the power loom from Britain in 1810 and brought the Industrial Revolution in America. And the English merchant Thomas Lomb played his role in the first factory of the UK, which was built thanks to the illicit diagrams of an Italian silk mill. According to the historian Doron Ben-Attar, the United States emerged as the world's industrial leader by illicitly appropriating mechanical and scientific innovations from Europe. So how can these nations become global leaders by imitating others' work? Does it mean that imitation can also lead to innovation? Well, the answer is yes. Varying categories of imitations have been identified by global production networks. These imitations include clones, design copies, product pirates, counterfeits, and technological leapfrogging. As far as creative imitation is concerned, only a few countries in the world can serve as a better example than South Korea, a clear beneficiary of imitation leading to creative imitation and eventually resulting in innovation. In 2012, a US court ruled against Samsung to pay $1 billion in damages to Apple for violating 6 of its patents on smartphone technology. Interestingly, a few years down the line, it was reported that Apple was hiring Samsung employees from the field of battery technology. So, from industrial and academic espionage to the multinationals poaching their competitors' employees, it appears that all is fair in the battle of science and technological development. But that's not everything. There is more to it. Just like religion, science also has its share of misconduct. For example, funding of scientific research and studies by the alcohol industry to change or influence the result and to create a perception in public that alcohol is healthy is nothing new. For the last 3 decades, the largest chocolate companies in the world have supported the scientific studies and research grants for cocoa science by donating millions of dollars for these causes. It comes as no surprise that dark chocolate has now been determined to be health food. A nutrition researcher from New York University analyzed 168 industry-funded studies and found that 156 showed results that favored the funder. Surprised? Well, you shouldn't be. From America's private and public sector to its academia, the corporate control of science is clearly visible. On the one hand, close partnerships between the private sector and academia can promote research culture and increase a country's scientific output, but on the other hand, it can also be a deadly cocktail, as after all, it all depends on the funder's intentions and interests. In 2016, Inibria noted that the endowment of a chair at Harvard Medical School by an alcohol industry poses an obvious ethical risk. But in a world where the leaders of medical schools and hospitals are often seen serving on drug company boards, this shouldn't come as a surprise. In 2014, researchers looked at the world's 50 largest pharmaceutical companies. Of the 50 companies examined, 3 private companies lacked public data on governance. But shockingly, 19 of 47 companies had at least one board member who concurrently held a leadership position at academic medical centers. These positions included deans and medical schools, department chairs, chief executive officers, and even university presidents. According to the researchers, such relationships wield considerable influence over research, clinical, and educational missions. In 2018, Biopharma Dive conducted an analysis and found that of the 19 largest pharmaceutical and biotech companies in the world, 12 of them had at least one director that was serving in a leadership position at a non-profit in the healthcare system at the same time. So in conclusion, this is how the system of science is being run. But why do many people not raise their voices against scientific misconduct as much as they do against religious misconduct? In the end, it's all about intentions, isn't it? India wants to be a science superpower, but it will be interesting to see the type of science India pursues in its journey to prosperity.
A couple things here. I think one thing that Karolina mentioned in her video, and one thing that she did not mention. So we saw the listing here kind of scientific-minded nations, with America being number 1, India being number 5. Brain drain. She talked about brain drain, about how Indian researchers are working in other countries. And then she kind of gave a story about what China did to try to combat that. So I think that's part of the issue here. I really do. The other part, too, about China, I think China is artificially placed in this top 5. And why is she, artificially placed there? They don't really research. They reverse engineer. That's not the same. And I think, China really is kind of as a cheater being mentioned in there, because all their technology comes from stealing from other people. So you have a company, let's say you make, you're the first one to make this really good. And China says, hey, you know what? We can make that for you really, really cheap. What are you paying here? Yeah, oh yeah, we could do it for so cheap. So you say, okay, I'm going to go build my factory to build this in China. And China says, oh, great, man, we got people to work. No problems, no unions, no raises. Anybody pops off, we'll take care of them. But what you don't realize is then China has taken this all apart, and they figured out how to make it. And now they've stolen your R&D. They steal R&D. They reverse engineer it, and then they just start competing against you right there. That is not the same of being scientifically minded. Being a copycat and being a surgeon are two different things. I can copy certain things, but I cannot create, right? They're not innovative people because they're a closed society. They're not innovative, just like Russia is not an innovative people because they're a closed society. You do not have that spark of inspiration in a closed society. You just don't. It just doesn't happen. India should probably be in the top 3. You take China out, I think America, Germany. The Germans are kind of crazy. We've had 2 world wars with them, right? India should be in the conversation of the top 3, I think, because Indians are a very, very, creative group of people by necessity. Look at the term Jew God, right? Jew God. Right now somebody said, what? Did he just say Jew God? How does he know about that? Indians create out of necessity, right? You know, necessity is the mother of all invention. And you see that in Indian life, how to get around things, how to do things, how to create things. So I think the creative power index is just greatly, it's just huge compared to China. So I think it's unfair to have China in there because they really, you know, if I go take my government exams in India and I have the answer key and I'm just using it, and then I say, oh, I'm the smartest one in my class. Am I really the smartest one in my class? Anyways, thanks for watching, man. I'll catch you guys later. Peace and much love.
नमस्ते दोस्तों, अगर आप ये सोच रहे होंगे कि प्रोफेसर के शो में मैं क्या कर रहा हूँ और मैं कौन हूँ, तो मैं आपको बता दूँ, मैं वही हूँ जिसके बारे में प्रोफेसर ने आपसे कई बार बात की है और मेरे बारे में बताया है। जी हाँ, मैं उनका बहुत अच्छा मित्र, बहुत अच्छा दोस्त हूँ और मुझे लोग सिड के नाम से जानते हैं और मैं एक इंडियन अमेरिकन हूँ। हम यहाँ पर प्रो इंडिया, प्रो भारत, प्रो हिंदू कॉजेस के लिए काम करते हैं, चाहे हिंदुस्तान में हो या अमेरिका में। और हमारा खुद का एक चैनल है इंडस लेंस, तो आप उसके लिए प्लीज़ 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 हमारे यूट्यूब चैनल इंडस लेंस को सब्सक्राइब करें। और जैसे प्रोफेसर ने आपको बताया, मैंने और उनके साथ पहले कोई रेडियो शोज़ किए हैं। अब हम फिर से जो इंडस लेंस के इंटरव्यूज़ और रिव्यूज़ हम करते हैं जो प्रो इंडिया, प्रो हिंदू इश्यूज़ पर, हम वो darkskyradio.com पर फीचर करने जा रहे हैं। तो आप ज़रूर सब्सक्राइब करें हमारे इंडसलैंड यूट्यूब चैनल को और ज़रूर हमारे रेडियो शोज़ को darkskyradio.com पर ज़रूर सुनिए। नमस्ते, जय हिंद।